MSU settles with Nassar victims. Looking ahead to the Mackinac Policy Conference, plus Stephen Henderson talks fixing pipes and trust in Flint with Mayor Karen Weaver. And art with a message in Michigan's most polluted zip code. I'm Christy McDonald. My Week is coming up next.
I have a question. Who wants to go first? To win? Who wants to grow our business? Who wants to make more money? Who wants more job opportunities? If you want Michigan to compete and become a top 10 state, raise your hand. Together, we've turned Michigan around and started moving forward. Now help us build a stronger Michigan than ever. Raise your hand at strongermichigan.com.
Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929.
Hi there and welcome to My Week. I'm Christy McDonald. Thanks so much for joining us. Coming up for you on the show, we'll take a look at what people will be talking about in the Mackinac Policy Conference, plus Flint Mayor Karen Weaver on her meeting with Governor Snyder about bottled water, and art that is bringing attention to the most polluted zip code in Michigan. That is all coming up for you on the show, but we are starting off with the announcement of a big settlement between Michigan State and the abuse victims of Dr. Larry Nassar. Let's bring in our My Week contributors, Nolan Finley of the Detroit News, Stephen Henderson of WDET Radio. It's good to see you guys. When this announcement came out, $500 million and settlement, people kind of, I think, stepped back and said that is a significant amount of money. The victims, or the survivors, they like to call themselves, say it's really not about the money. But Nolan, I'm going to start with you. If you are an alum of Michigan State, or you are a student there, you are faculty, and again, really, we all live in the state of Michigan, and we're paying in one way or the other. You're thinking, where is all this money going to come from?
I thought they got off easy. If you look at the amount of money per victim at the Penn State scandal, sexual abuse scandal there, it was something like $3 million. This doesn't average out to quite that much. It's about a little less than $2 million per victim. They could have gotten hit for up to $1 billion if you use Penn State as a scale. Where this money's coming from, I talked to somebody who was close to the settlement yesterday, and it's going to come out of insurance. They've got to track down their insurance, and that's going to be a fight.
I was just going to say, when's the last time you tried to get insurance for anything? I'm sure they're going to dig in on this.
They're going to bond out, and they're going to use pools of money, unallocated money, reserve funds all over the university. There'll be less capital projects. They're not going to fill some positions that they had been planning to fill or to add. You know, a university's always expanding. They've got budget cuts going on. They're going to have to run a lot more efficient ship, because I don't think you can pass this on to students in the form of tuition. You're competitive for students. You can only get so expensive with your tuition. Are they going to charge more per year than University of Michigan charges?
Well, they can't do that.
And they're going to have the largest freshman class coming in next fall. And you better believe that people are going to be angry if they see some kind of extra fee tacked on there. And
so Governor Engler said this morning when I talked to him that they're not going to. They've already made a promise not to raise tuition for this incoming class. They're not going to go back and change that. But he said, you know, down the road, this will affect what they have money to spend on things that will affect both undergraduates and graduates and faculty. I also talked, though, to one of the victims this morning, and there's a real gulf still between the position that Engler took, which was, look, this is one in a number of things that we've already done to try to make this better, to try to move forward. When I talked with the victim this morning, Amanda Tomashaw, what she said was, they haven't done anything. She doesn't even feel like they've taken responsibility for what happened or their role in it. And as this settlement negotiation, and remember, this is not an announcement of an actual settlement. it's an announcement of an agreement to settle. There's a lot of back and forth that will have to take place.
So, Stephen, did she tell you exactly what she wanted to see from the university specifically that shows that they understand the situation that they were in?
Yeah, well, first, she wants an apology. I mean, she said, when I asked her what was the point at which, this was someone who reported what Dr. Nassar did to her in 2014. The university denied it outright until 2016, and I said, well, what was the point at which you felt that the university turned toward taking more responsibility? She said, I'll let you know when that happens. She still doesn't feel as though that has happened. Now, you know, Engler detailed a lot of the things that they've put into place to try to prevent this kind of thing from happening again. But again, I think there is this disconnect between him and his approach, which is very reflective of the sort of political environment he comes from, and something like this, which is about different kinds of connections and interactions you have to have with people. I'm not sure he's reached that space.
So would something also, Nolan, would it also be saying, okay, an apology, but then saying the Board of Trustees, we're going to have them all resign, a new Board of Trustees, is that what's going to take some kind of different change in leadership there?
I don't know. It's not going to happen. So I don't know what it's going to take. I mean, certainly the settlement is an admission that they did something wrong. But
in legal terms, yeah.
So you've got that message. But meanwhile, you got Lou Anna Simon, who was ultimately the person responsible for this, was allowed to retire, still drawing a $750,000 salary, getting a very nice new office on campus with an office for her husband right next door who is drawing a salary. So in terms of looking at this and say who was held accountable, I don't think you can point your finger and say anyone was held accountable.
All right. Well, moving on, turning now to the Mackinac Policy Conference, which is coming up right after Memorial Day. And for the 7th straight year, Detroit Public Television will carry the entire conference live online with nightly specials from the Grand Hotel. So you'll get an idea of what the state's biggest influencers are talking about when it comes to the future of Michigan. I spoke with Detroit Regional Chamber CEO Sandy Barua and Conference Chair Ray Talang about the conference pillars this year, which is trust, is Michigan prepared, and the mobility disruption.
We're talking about the regulatory and policy environment that is going to be necessary for Michigan and the United States to continue to be in the leadership position regarding next generation mobility in the connected vehicle. So we know that the technology hurdles are huge, but we're handling them. Kind of how society adapts to self-driving cars will be another challenge. But one of the unsung challenges is how are we going to adapt our policy environment and our insurance and our regulatory environment.
There's a long road ahead of us too, and a couple of the critical issues that you'll hear about on the island will be focused in those areas of education. You know, for the first time, I'm a lifelong Detroiter, and for the first time in my professional career, the business community has rallied around the fact that we need to do something that's really different in K through 12 in order to change the outcomes that we're achieving, given some of the more recent test results that we're seeing today. So K through 12 education is a critical, infrastructure will be critical, and then you know, continuing to focus on the state's finances. All of these critical elements that, you know, want us to live, work, and play here in the state cost money, and having the ability and having the right strategies to finance it and fund it will be critical as well.
You know, I think it's really interesting, and they set the pillars and obviously have the panels around those on the main stage, but I always find it interesting to talk about what the conversation is off the main stage at the Mackinac Policy Conference. And really, I think it's a time every year to step back and say, where are we as a state, and what are the most important things that we're talking about? So Nolan, I'm going to ask you for your top 3 discussion points that's been happening up on the island this year.
Well,
see, Stephen just said few, so I can think of my 3 while you're going ahead.
No, I mean, you look at both the agenda and some of the side things that are going on up there. Education, workforce training, very key conversations. Every day there are education issues that will be explored. Business leaders are planning on engaging up there with some of the education advocacy and reform groups. Education is going to dominate. I think you're going to see a lot of side discussion about the RTA, the regional bus system. They won't have that worked out by the time they get to Mackinac. And I think once they get up there, if they don't have a deal, that's getting awfully late. It's almost, and so the discussion has to turn to what do we do next? Where do we go over these next 2 years so we don't end up in the same place 2 years ago?
2 years from now?
They can't give up.
All right, so you got education 1, RTA 2, 3. I'm going to throw in politics there. I just took care of your
elections, right?
Stephen, I just did your work for you.
Yeah, right. Elections for sure, and these nasty fights that are taking place on both sides of the political spectrum and the governor's race.
So if you think if Schuette and Kelly run into each other in the Audubon bar,
in the Geranium bar,
you think
or
we'll
wherever.
see a welterweight bout going on in there?
It would definitely be welterweight.
That'd be fun to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been a while since we had this kind of rancor on both sides of the political spectrum in a gubernatorial year. So I think will play out pretty robustly.
And I think it's very interesting too, because you do have the business leaders of the state and heads of foundations that are going to sit back and take a look at who's the next leader of Michigan going to be, and what kind of direction are they going to be taking in terms of policy
and maybe
regulation.
Maybe we'll catch a glimpse of Debbie Stabenow, who's running for re-election in Senate. We haven't seen her in this state.
Well, who's running against her?
I think she's
issue,
expected
right?
to be up there.
I mean,
she's got a pretty good skate there.
If you're in a re-election campaign, you should at least show up
She'll
for that.
be there.
She'll definitely
The other
be
thing
there.
that these years tend to be on Mackinac is, I mean, this is the last year of Rick Snyder's term.
Yeah.
This will be his swan song. You know, he started out as somebody who really embraced the Mackinac experience as a way to announce big things and get big stuff done. The bridge got done, I think, the first year.
RTA got done the next year. On and on.
So how does he approach this year, you know, given how things have changed over 8 years?
Exactly.
You know,
so that, and then Detroit, and the entire bankruptcy process. Flint. I mean, all of these things have played out.
Played out up there.
But, you know, it's not, the last year or so for governors in their term up there, it's never as, I mean, Granholm didn't come the last 2 years.
No, she didn't, that's right.
And it certainly wasn't as celebratory for John Engler in his last year appearance there as it was, you know, in his initial. There's a little looking beyond going on, if you will.
Yeah. Well, of course, we will be up there, and Detroit Public Television will carry it all for you, so make sure you find us online, MiWeek.org, and you can see us every night at 7:30 then when we are up there. Well, Nestle announced this week that it would donate over 1.5 million bottles of water to Flint through the summer after the state cut off water handouts last month. Stephen recently spoke with Flint Mayor Karen Weaver on American Black Journal about the conversation she had with Governor Snyder about stopping bottled water, and it was pretty to the point, Stephen, when you talked to her about it.
She's always really blunt about these things, and she's somebody whose message is always very sharp and refined. She was, I think it's fair to say, angry about the response she got from the governor about why they wouldn't continue the water.
And she also talked about where they are in terms of replacing pipes. Go ahead and take a listen.
I think it was a bad decision by the governor to do that. And what he said was the water is testing good, so you don't need it anymore. And one of the things I said to him is, I'm aware of the test results we're getting. I mean, you know, why wouldn't I be paying attention to that?
Right.
And they are better, you know, and we're glad they're better. Who wouldn't want good water? I mean, everybody deserves it. Why wouldn't we want good test results? I said, but our fight is we have not finished with the lead service line replacement.
Right.
We're almost halfway through. And one of the things we were told, and EPA has not changed their stance, was that when you're doing that amount of construction across your city, that those old pipes, lead particulates can break off and get into the system.
Right.
And so we still have to be able to protect ourselves. It's still a public health issue. And so that was why it was so important for the bottled water distribution to stay in place.
Yeah.
The other thing was the test results we were getting back from the schools. 90% of the results were good, but 10% we were still getting very high results in our schools. And the third thing was it's a matter of trust.
Yeah.
You gave your word. You said that those pods would stay open indefinitely until we got through the replacement of those bad pipes. And we knew it was only going to be at longest a 3-year process.
Right.
And to, you know, do that, you know, I could have gone with things are better. Maybe you don't need as much, bottled water. We can go from 8 cases a day to 4 cases. We can go from 4 water distribution sites to 2. But they needed to stay in place because we still have families where the pipes haven't been changed.
Where the pipes aren't changed?
And while we can argue that the water tests good, we have homes that test high because the in-home plumbing, the fixtures have been damaged as a result.
There's all kinds of residual effects of this that still mean people don't have clean water.
Exactly.
Michelle Wolf, the comedian.
Thank you, Michelle Wolf.
At the correspondence dinner, the last thing she said is, Flint still doesn't have clean water, and that's still true.
Well, like I said,
in some cases.
In some cases, because like I said, it may test good, but if your pipes haven't been changed, if you've got plumbing that has been destroyed, there's still an issue. There's still an issue. And so, you know, we said...
When you ask the governor what's going through his mind when he either makes these decisions or signs off on them, what does he say to you?
You know, well, I explained all of this to him. And for him to have the remark that he did, which was Flint needs to get over it, I don't know. I thought it was just a very callous and sensitive remark, especially
Does he say those kind of things to you?
He said that in the meeting to me, yes, and told me that I needed to come back when I had a different conversation. I said, I'd like to have a different conversation, but right now the conversation is staying the same. You know, I had brought, it was so interesting because he wanted to talk about economic development, and we have been making progress with economic development. And I've taken my new economic development director to the meeting as one of the people that went, hoping that the conversation would go well and we'd get to talk about that as well. But when he told me, you know, come back when you're ready to have a different conversation, I said the conversation is not going to change when we still have issues with our water. You know.
So what are we looking at in terms of the timetable for pipe replacement, which you said you're about 50% through? And then I think the bigger question is, at what point do you feel like the people of Flint will be able to trust again that you go to the faucet, you turn the faucet on, and you're not worried about what's coming out?
You know, it's interesting because, you know, some people may never. Some people may never, but we do want to go by the science. And right now what we've said is let us get all of those bad pipes out and have good results over a stable period of time. But what I've been pushing for and looking for is sign off from the medical community, the public health community, the science community, because we needed them to, you know, even though anybody knows brown water is bad, but we did need them to validate that with data, and so we want them to validate the results that we get that it's good. And so that's who I'm using to determine when we can say, okay, we're through this.
Good.
Yes.
You mentioned economic development, and there is really not just good news, but really good news, surprising news coming out of the efforts that you're making to try to build the city's economy.
I mean, and you know what, we can even start with something as basic as when we were handing out the water. We said we want Flint people getting paid to do that.
To do that work.
Exactly. To package up the food, to do the education going door to door, to let people know the proper use and maintenance of the filters. Let's hire Flint people. When we got the construction contracts, we made sure that the contractors were from the city of Flint and then Genesee County. So we wanted to take care of our own first, and we were very good at doing that. I was excited to be able to have one of the contractors is an African-American company, W.T. Stevens, and it was the first time in Flint's history that we had an African-American company get a multi-million-dollar contract. And they've hired a lot of people from Flint, and so have the other companies. They have hired Flint workers, and they're from Flint, the companies. But we just, you know, one of the things I was telling you earlier is Lear Corporation has come into Flint and built a factory. They've invested $30 or $31 million in the city doing this, and it's the first time we've had a factory built in Flint in over 30 years.
And finally on MiWeek, one of the most polluted zip codes in Michigan is in southwest Detroit. It's 48217. And while it's home to heavy industry, it's also home to residents who have been educating themselves and fighting for years in order to have a cleaner environment. And recently, some art students from the University of Michigan helped illustrate the area's struggles in a very visible way. Here's a look from Detroit Performs.
Our community 48217 is known for its stink.
This is the most polluted zip code in the state of Michigan.
Our community should not be casualties for industry's greed.
Based on the recent election and funding for Great Lakes environmental issues, last year in the call for new courses, I decided it was good timing for us to get the students out and partner with some local communities to bring in, environmental issues more out into the public sphere.
This isn't our voice, this is the community's voice. We go to school at University of Michigan, we don't live here, and we are painting this mural, but we can only learn from the people that live here because this is really their situation.
The mural came about after I was asked to do what we call toxic tours by the University of Michigan. And I took a group of students and some professors on a tour around the industry that has been plaguing our community and been one of our challenges for years with their emissions of pollution that is impacting my community.
Miss Teresa Landrum is extremely passionate and inspiring, and so I thought she'd be a perfect person to connect with for this class.
This is one of the first African American establishments after World War II, but I grew up in this. I've always noticed the smells, so we accepted it as a norm, but it's not normal. I really feel disheartened that this has gone on so long from the industries and nobody paid attention. That minority, low-income communities are being impacted so severely by these industries that pollute.
Residents in this area, they're fighting a system that allows them to be in sacrifice zone. And they're not doing good because their lives are inundated with the pollution and the health impacts from all of it.
Students have certainly noticed, you know, depending on which way the wind is blowing, you'll notice more odor than other days. But to hear the stories of, you know, particulates that are, you know, covering cars, and it's not hard to imagine covering lungs.
The pollution that is coming from these surrounding industries is having a serious impact on our health. We see a high rate of lung cancer in this area. We see a high rate of COPD in this area. We have a high rate of asthma among our children as well as adults. Working with these students have been wonderful because after the toxic tour, they said, what can we do? They decided among themselves that we need to do something.
It's part of a growing environmental awareness that students have to go through, and how can they become more empathetic to the folks that are living with the pollution, because we're all taking part in this, because we're all, you know, living with cars, and, you know, we all use electricity, and so pollution is just, it's hidden from most of us most of the time.
A lot of these situations are in communities of color, communities of low income, and so really wanted to target the injustices that lie there, and Ms. Landrum helped us a lot with that.
This mural speaks because it gives us a voice. It creates conversation. People are stopping and asking, well, what is the mural about? How did it come about? Well, then we can discuss, well, there's been pollution issues out here all the time.
I was born and raised out here, but I've also been working with the community for about 15 years. So in all of these years of working together, this mural is one of the things that has been one of the high points.
It's just about initiating change as best as a mural can within the community, basically to promote justice. Also, it was really important for us for the community members to be able to see themselves and their situations within the mural. On the very far left, we have kind of the silhouette of the looming industry, and coming out of that is the monster of industry who has the hazardous sign for the eyes. The smoke coming out of his mouth is the basically representation of the pollution on his back with the industry as well. And then we have the three figures, and we wanted to represent different age groups from the community. That was really important to us as well, and specifically also representing women, because Ms. Landrum was saying that a lot of the people that are involved in this fight are women, and they're all in a fight towards stopping this big monster of industry and really stating their claim on the power that they have with their voice. And then the sunflowers that we have are kind of like a representation of more of a brighter hope. Miss Landrum was telling us how they had done protests before with sunflowers on their signs with messages in between, so we took that and added it in and then mirrored that with the gears on the other side.
The images speak to me because it lets you know that community, we're becoming aware and we're tired, and it addresses that we need somebody to stand up and say, stop. We're telling the companies, we're telling the city, we're telling the state, we're telling the federal government, work with us and help stop this pollution and industry from encroaching more and more on communities.
I hope that the people can just really see that their fight is recognized and that there are people who are with them, supporting them, and that their work every day matters.
Inspiring change is, making topics visible and letting people see and understand it and acknowledge that there is a problem, and how can they come together to help fight it. And Teresa will continue to be, I'm sure, a strong voice in the community.
And that's going to do it for MiWeek. Thanks so much for joining us. Next week, we have a special 1-hour MiWeek, taking a look at the workforce of the future, jobs and the skills gap. We'll be on the road in Detroit at Randolph Career and Technical Center. Starts at 7 p.m. We hope that you will join us for that. We're also on Facebook and Twitter at MiWeek. Find us there. I'm Christy McDonald. We'll see you next time. Take care.
I have a question. Who wants to go first to win? Who wants to grow our business? Who wants to make more money? Who wants more job opportunities? If you want Michigan to compete and become a top 10 state, raise your hand. Together, we've turned Michigan around and started moving forward. Now help us build a stronger Michigan than ever. Raise your hand at strongermichigan.com.
Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Maryland cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929.